Well, good morning. Hi, Bud. I tried to talk a little bit last night about our new servers, and was just really scattered. So we'll try again. I have 3. I have one for companion breeders getting started, one for small scale rescue and foster getting started, and one for the pet specific community. Right now, the vast majority of the people breeding pigeons are breeding them to win something. There's no real regard for the pigeon itself, aside from its either performance or show winning capacity. And if not that individual's, then that individual's capacity to bear children who can win either performance or exhibition competitions. I touched a little bit last night on the results of what breeders consider to be constantly improving their stock. Now, just like with show dogs and cats, what they mean by improving is moving closer to the show standard. I don't know how it works in dogs and cats in this specific regard, but with pigeons, when the show standard gets too easy to meet, they change it to be more difficult. So there isn't even any real love for the breed as it is. It's all about chasing the challenge of something more difficult to produce. Which is why I don't raise showbirds anymore. Very few competitors will have a bird older than 3 competing in a show. You will almost never see one who is 5, and you certainly won't see those among their breeding stock, because you show your best, and if your best is a 5-year-old, in the 4 years since you produced that individual, you have failed to improve. The practical upshot and downside of that are that birds are only kept by show breeders for about 3 years. Nobody keeps up with them when they're sold. Nobody cares what happens to them when they are not their hatch loft's problem anymore. Once they're past 3, they're just an extra mouth to feed. And they're expecting to have way better stock than that. The problem with this is that the bird only has to be physically fit for 3 years. An individual is their most productive in the show ring and in the nest boxes between 1 and 3 years of age. So we're starting to see birds past 3 having health issues crop up amongst purebreds. So what I'm trying to do with the Mix project is clear as much of that out as possible. Purebreds of any species are meant to be as homogeneous as possible, meaning that they have as much of the same genetics as you can manage. They are supposed to be cookie cutter cutouts that might be different in color. And that severe a genetic bottleneck has really serious results. So what we're trying to do is basically break the bottle. The specific trait that I want is human-focused docility. Not just that a bird will tolerate you picking it up, not just a bird that doesn't think it can get away so it doesn't try. A bird that actively comes and seeks you out, wants to know what you're doing, wants to spend time with you, is contented and feels safe and happy in your presence. For example, is Gus. Hi, Gus. Hello, Gus. My good girl. And believe it or not, this Ellie, even though she avoids me like the plague at treat times, but that has nothing to do with me or treat time and everything to do with being mobbed by the rest of the flock. She doesn't like crowds. So when everybody else wants some, she's like, no thanks, I'll just wait. It's not that important. Since we also want them to be especially easily trainable, tendency towards being food motivated is something that we're also trying to incorporate. But the long and short of it is that what we want instead of a specific aesthetic is a specific temperament with a body that will last as long as possible. Homing pigeons are the most athletic breed, and there are homer individuals who can live to be past 25 years old. We've heard some reasonably reliable reports of a few individuals making it into their very, very early 30s. And that's like twice the lifespan of a particularly long-lived family dog. Most dog breeds are ancient by the time they hit 15. A pigeon is halfway through its life at 15, or should be. That extended longevity and small size and easy diet to manage, as well as their intelligence, their capacity to learn house rules, makes them a fantastic companion bird. And we honestly believe that if you are going to make them reproduce, your goals should be longevity and friendliness towards companionship. So you don't have to have a whole loft to do that. You can have as few as 2 pair. And we are working on encouraging, instead of the freaking giant lofts, breeding for quantity in hopes that that quality will come out of it. Like, just by law of averages, some of them have to be decent. We are looking to encourage people who want to raise baby birds to focus as much as they possibly can on the physiological quality of their livestock and of the temperament of their livestock. There's lots of things you need to be able to do to breed well. For example, you have to have space not just for every breeding pair you have, but you have to have a place for their offspring to be until they're matched. You have to have a plan for every single offspring that you hatch. It's great to have your keepbacks, but your keepbacks are going to be a very small percentage of the birds you raise. Or the birds you could potentially raise. So what do? Well, fortunately, instead of having to surgically spay or neuter them, which will kill them most of the time, as those organs are incredibly difficult to get to on a bird, you can prevent reproduction simply by swapping the real eggs out with fakes. And hatch control is an important aspect of both breeding and rescue. We will talk about in the breeding forum we talk about hatch control. There are going to be times when lots of people want babies, and there are going to be times when nobody wants babies, and you have no way of controlling it. So we talk about the use of waiting lists. Pigeons aren't like rats where you only have a few month window of this is when they're safest to breed. You're going to hopefully have this bird for 2 decades, at least. And they are viable up to 18 years. So you're not going to be in a rush of, oh God, the window is closing if I want offspring from this individual. So you have literally all the freedom in the world to control your own population. We are trying to avoid overproduction. We are trying to avoid unwanted birds. We want to provide birds for people who want them and want them with a known history. That's generally speaking what the pet owners that go to a breeder want them for. They don't necessarily want them as a status symbol. That is a misconception, although it is understandable that rescues have this misconception. What the average person who is not looking to breed them wants from a pet animal that they will seek out a breeder for is specifically the known history. They want to know what the parents are like. They want to know what the health and temperament of the family line is like. They want to know what they are getting so that they can plan as well as they possibly can to meet its needs long term. That is not irresponsible. That is like the opposite of irresponsible. So, we are mostly going to be focused on very, very small groups. We're going to talk about how to set up for 1 to 4 pair ideally. Once you're comfortable with that number and you have enough of a waiting list that you can find homes for that number of offspring, we will talk about when and how to expand and when expansion is not a good idea. And what makes potential expansions not a good idea. We'll also, of course, be discussing housing, diet, enrichment, training that makes things easiest on the babies transitioning to their new homes, selecting new stock from other lofts, selecting from your own, all those kinds of technical, practical things. Now, for our rescue server, since there is not as much involved, well, let me rephrase that, because there's often more involved in rescue. Like, when you're breeding, you at least expect to get a healthy bird. When you're rescuing, you expect them to be in dire straits practically every time. Nobody gives healthy animals away for free. And even if you don't pay a penny for an animal that comes in, or if you don't pay a penny to bring that animal in, it's still going to cost you in time, food, veterinary testing. God forbid the tests for anything come out positive. But you're going to have to expect that. Rescues rescues have to expect to deal with parasites, with injuries, with bacterial and viral disease. Because rescues are providing homes for birds who are unwanted. And you do not have to have a large facility to make a difference in rescue. You don't. You would not believe how much help you could be to a large-scale rescue, or how much help it would be for a large-scale rescue to have a network of small-scale fosters that they could count on when they need them. So we'll be walking people through that. We will be walking people through small-scale setup, and by small scale I mean like an apartment where you might be able to house 1 to 4 individuals at any given time. We will talk about common parasites, common signs of disease, what to look for in a good vet, what to do if you can't find a vet. You would not believe how often that happens. Or you might, if you have any kind of pigeon experience. Both the breeder and the rescue servers are geared towards getting beginners started. So we will talk about small scale down to a single individual that needs help. We're going to talk about quarantine procedure because, well, fosters are going to have to. A rescue may not have space or may not have the facility to quarantine. They may get an overflow of animals that they can't house, and those need specialized attention. Hi, Puddin'. Hello. Lots and lots and lots of large-scale rescues would benefit, for any species, would benefit for individuals willing to foster a few at a time on a regular basis, who will just help take that tiny, tiny fraction of the load off. Lily, you are having so much trouble. Also, contrary to rescuer belief, although again, I cannot blame them for having this mindset at all, good breeders are not competition. People go to breeders because they want the known history. People go to rescues because they want to help. You can do both. As a matter of fact, I'm very firmly of the opinion that if you bring animals of any species into the world on a regular basis, you really, really, really need to be interested and updated on the rescue community for that species. What we want to avoid is becoming part of the problem. What we want to do is make ourselves partners. Ideally, we want the rescue job to no longer be needed. So we should be at their sides advocating for them. If somebody does not want something specific, for example, my loft breeds primarily for therapy birds. If somebody does not want a bird specifically trained for therapy, then I will point them to a rescue. That's just my general policy. If there's not a rescue available and they want a pet, fine, I will probably have a pet quality bird for them. But when it is available, always, always, always advocate for and point towards a rescue. There are times when people do not want to rescue, and for the average person, the reason for that is simply the unknown. They do not know that animals' health history. They do not know that animals' mental health history. They don't know what that animal has been through, and they are not certain that they can meet that animal's needs. And that's what it comes down to. It is not just that it's an inconvenience for that caretaker. It is concern that they will not be able to meet that animal's need. That is literally all it boils down to when people want to avoid a rescue. This is especially true for beginners who have never had that species before. They want to start out as smoothly as possible. And generally speaking, once they are more comfortable with the basic care of that species, for a social bird like a pigeon, it's really, really easy for somebody who came to a breeder for a companion to then go to a rescue to get company for that companion. Oof, and I am already about out of time. Good Lord. I can literally talk on these topics forever. But we'll be for small scale rescues, talking about the practical things. How are you gonna house them? How are you gonna feed them? What enrichment to give them? When to give them that enrichment? How to go about quarantine? And how to go about evaluation and matching and screening. I have run out of time entirely to talk about the pet forum. But we'll probably do that when I have training time with Beeps. In addition to our clients, adopters, and apprentices, I would like to thank our subscribers here on YouTube, our patrons on Patreon, the Friends of Our Business page on Facebook, and our followers on Tumblr, Instagram, and Twitter for their contributions, both financial and intellectual. We'll reconvene momentarily and continue.